Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Greenman, and I have the true honor to be the president and CEO of the Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island. On behalf of our board of directors and our staff, I want to welcome you here to the Dwares JCC. I want to thank the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel for presenting this event this evening and for welcoming our great speaker. And I want to thank the Providence Community Kollel and Project Shoresh for co-sponsoring this event along with us here at the Alliance. I'm really excited to hear from Nitsana and hear her words, and I'm also so pleased that Lieutenant Colonel Philpin will be receiving the MENSCH of the Year award, which is such a great name for an award, and I wish, truthfully, I wish we could steal it and use it for the Alliance, because it's great. As I'm sure Nitsana will talk about tonight, we live in difficult times, right? Often it can be easier to push hard issues like BDS to the side, but at the Jewish Alliance, we're committed to bringing our diverse community together. As Jews, debate is part of the fabric of our religion. I hear some laughter, but it's totally true. When you're in my role, you hear debate literally all the time. There are any number of incredibly important issues in our community and in our world today, and the chances of us agreeing on all having the same position are basically zero. But it's always been that way. And at the Alliance, we're so pleased to co-sponsor tonight's event because it gives us the opportunity, it gives our community the chance to hear such an important perspective on such an incredibly important topic. I hope today and into the future, we're all able to listen and to create the space for this kind of respectful dialogue, this respectful conversation, and to remember that we're all part of one community as we discuss these difficult issues. And we all agree that a stronger, more vibrant community benefits us all, and it's why I'm so pleased to work toward that goal with all of you. And so I want to again thank the Coalition for Israel for presenting tonight's event, to all of you for being here, and thank you so much. That's my cue to get off the stage. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you here tonight. My name is Mary Green, and I'm president of the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel. And I want to welcome you tonight on behalf of RICI. We call ourselves RICI. I'm a faith leader of the Jubilee Sisters Bible Study Group in Wakefield, Rhode Island, and some who you met tonight already, you've already shaken their hands as you came through the door, and they have been in charge of greeting and the setup and the registration. What the Jews and Christians of RICI have in common is God's promise to Abraham in Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless Israel, and I will curse those who curse Israel. And in Israel shall all the people of the world be blessed. That really is one of my favorite verses from Torah. We have been blessed tonight in so many ways. So I want to thank our speaker, Nitsana Darshan Leitner, for making time to come to Rhode Island. Many thanks to our co-sponsors, the Jewish Alliance of Rhode Island, Project Shoresh, and Providence Community Kollel. For connecting us with our keynote speaker, we thank Tricia Miller, who is president of Christians and Jews United for Israel, our next-door neighbors in Massachusetts. Over the past 2 years, as you can see from your handout, we've drawn community support from synagogues and churches, for which we are very thankful. Praise Tabernacle Church, which is affiliated with a powerful national organization called CUFI, Christians United for Israel, has partnered with us on a number of occasions. Abad of West Bay has generously provided us with space for our monthly board meeting. RICI came into being as a response of rising unfair criticism of Israel in Rhode Island that amounted to denying the legitimacy of the Jewish state. We join those national and international voices that consider anti-Zionism to be anti-Semitic. Our aim is to make anti-Semitism in Rhode Island socially unacceptable, just like open prejudice and biased against other minorities are. Our keynote speaker, Nitsana, will address these issues tonight in her talk about her battles on the international level. Following her talk, there will be an open question and answer session. So please hold your questions and concerns until the very end. Following the program in the lobby, there are kosher refreshments, and Nitsana will be signing copies of her groundbreaking book, Harpoon, which will be available for purchase. Now I'd like to introduce you to David Talon, who you probably know. He's Vice President of RICI.
Good evening. I'm Dave Talon, the Vice President of RICI, and I've been asked to say a few words about terrorism and the Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions Movement, or BDS. This was launched in September 2001 at the infamous and anti-Semitic UN World Conference on the Elimination of Racism held in Durban, South Africa. The instigators were a group of radically and politically powerful organizations that demanded the complete international isolation of Israel as an apartheid state. BDS gets support of well-intentioned individuals by claiming it is merely aimed at criticism of Israeli human rights policies. It is the relentless demonization of Israel by BDS that's making life for American Jews unsafe. A major player in BDS is a group called Jewish Voice for Peace. Yes. Their website states that they unequivocally oppose Zionism. JVP publicly supports convicted terrorists. Now, Jewish Voice for Peace is really not very Jewish, and it's not very peaceful, but they do have a very loud voice. And believe it or not, Jewish Voice for Peace actually opposed sending American policemen to training courses in Israel, like the one that our honoree tonight, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Philbin from the Rhode Island State Police, attended earlier this year, sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League. Jewish Voice for Peace lied that Israel teaches law enforcement officers how to use police brutality against American minorities. JVP was actually successful in preventing some police departments from participating in the Israel Law Enforcement Exchange Training Program. In particular, the Vermont State Police and the Northampton, Massachusetts Police were stopped from sending anybody to this conference, to this training class. They attempted to block the Rhode Island State Police and Lieutenant Colonel Philbin from attending. We in the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel were concerned that they might succeed, especially since one member of the Rabbinic Council of Jewish Voice for Peace actually sits on the Rhode Island Board of Rabbis. So we lobbied Governor Raimondo to make sure that she sent Lieutenant Colonel Philbin to the Israeli Defense Force training course. Thankfully, the governor listened to us and approved this trip. We're honored tonight to have Lieutenant Colonel Joe Philbin with us. Joe participated in the exchange program in Israel in December 2018 and returned to tell a very different story. Incidentally, Joe did not learn anything about using police brutality against minorities. Maybe he slept through that class. So tonight, RICI is presenting him with the MENSCH of the Year Award for his commitment to speaking out with the truth as he witnessed it. To tell us more about this award and to present it, here is Luann Pizzullo, the Secretary of Rhode Island Coalition for Israel.
Thank you. I present it without the present.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It's a joy, a privilege, and an honor to be here with all of you. My name is Luann Pizzullo, and as you heard Dave, I am the Secretary to Rhode Island Coalition for Israel. And I fell in love with Israel back in 1985 when I went there for the first time. And I've been going back ever since. So my 15th trip will be coming up. And an experience that will change everyone's lives. Anyway, since that time, I'm becoming very involved with RICI and the support of the nation of Israel. I am a Christian Zionist, I make no apologies. I'm there to support the nation of Israel, to defend and stand up when we know that there's been an injustice. And since July, Colonel Philbin has been speaking about the Israel Law Enforcement Exchange Program, and he's also spoken to 6 groups. One is the Jubilee Sisters in Wakefield, the Laurel Med, Praise Tabernacle, Chabad West Bay, the Providence Hebrew Day School, and Torah Yisrael. He was planning to speak at a church in Seekonk on Saturday, but he was ill. And the pastor wants you to know you can't get sick on Saturday and Sunday. During the week, but not on Saturday and Sunday. And he's looking forward to having you rescheduled. For the rest of the year, he'll be speaking at 3 more locations, which is the Tamarisk Assisted Living Center, Rhode Island College, which is a biggie because we have Kufi on campus. These are young people that came down to Kufi. I've been a member for over 11 years, and we're so excited to have these young people step. You know, they're in the firing line there. You know, and so they're stepping up and speaking out in defense of Israel.
What is Kufi?
And Kufi Christians United for Israel.
Thank you.
And the membership is now exceeds over 7.4 million. We're one of the largest pro-Israel groups around. And he has 2 dates scheduled for 2020. And we welcome the community and any groups that you think might be interested, and if you would approach them and see if they would be interested, because he's a wonderful speaker. He speaks from his heart, and you know, that's the best kind, because it resonates. And RICI will publicize all of his speaking dates through our email newsletter. Tonight we are presenting Colonel Philbin with the MENSCH of the Year Award. That word, MENSCH, in Yiddish and in the dictionary means a man of integrity and honor. And Colonel Philbin fits the bill. So I would like the Colonel and his beautiful wife, Carrie, to come up here to make this presentation. Patience, sablanut. Okay, I can see it. Lieutenant Colonel Joe Philbin, Rhode Island State Police MENSCH of the Year Award 2019. In gratitude for your public support of law enforcement, training with Israel, your actions have strengthened the U.S.-Israel partnership, the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel. With great honor, we present this to you, sir.
Well, this is a great honor for me. I don't know if a lot of you watch the news, but I retired from the state police today.
A lot of time to speak.
That's right. I broke the news to Howard that I can still speak, actually more often now. I have plenty of free time. But I was talking to my wife on the way up here, and I feel blessed. I always feel blessed for my trip to Israel. It really changed my life. I came back and spoke about law enforcement, but more importantly, I spoke about what Israel meant to me. I'm not an expert on it, but I was there for 10 days, and I remember each day as if it were yesterday. I think it's an amazing place. The people I met there are some of the best I've ever met. But even better yet, the people from Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, I actually consider them my family now. I'm around them so much, and they're so welcoming and warm to me. I feel blessed to have spent 25 years with the Rhode Island State Police. They're an amazing organization. The men and women there are the best. I can't tell you enough how hard they work every day. So today it's a very special day for me. I was amazed to receive this award, and I'm honored, and I can't thank you enough. I went to lunch with my mother today, and every time I go to lunch with my mother, I have to talk about the Israel trip, because she's 90 years old, and she's still amazed that I saw the place where Christ was born, where he was laid to rest, and she's jealous, and if I could get her on the plane, I would, but I don't think it would go too well. But I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. That trip changed my life, and I will speak to anybody that wants to hear my voice. Retired, so don't forget now I'm retired, so you can ask me questions, I can actually answer them, because I don't represent the state police anymore. But I'm grateful, and I actually feel blessed to have met some incredible people in here, and I consider you close friends, and whatever I can do to spread the word about how an amazing place Israel is, and the people there, and how off some people are about what goes on with the law enforcement there. They're way off base. So if I can speak anywhere, anytime, and I cannot thank you enough for this wonderful award.
Hi everybody, my name is Ken Schneider and I'm the treasurer of the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel. And we are honored tonight to have with us from Israel, Nitsana Darshan Leitner. And she is the co-founder and president of Sharut Hadim, the Israel Law Center. We've all heard the expression, follow the money. And under Nitsana's leadership, the Israel Law Center not only follows the money, but bankrupts the terrorists one lawsuit at a time. Since 2003, Nitsana and her legal team have not only been fighting the legal battles in Israel, but in the United States and all over the world. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been won and gone back to the victims of terror and their families. Lawsuits have been brought against the Palestinian Authority, Airbnb, Facebook, Twitter, Hamas, Iran, many banks, and others all over the world. It is my pleasure to introduce, according to the Jerusalem Post 2018, one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world, Nitsana Darshan Leitner.
Good evening. I will start from the beginning. And the beginning was the year of 2000, when the Intifada broke out in Israel. When buses got blown up, when there were ambushes and stabbing attacks and shootings on the streets on a daily basis, and people were getting killed. So Israel called to a special military call-up, and 2 soldiers were called to their base in Bethel. One was about to become a father, the other one had 3 little children. They drove their car to their base, but they didn't know their way so well. They made a mistake. A mistake that happened to be the mistake of their life. They made the wrong turn to the city of Ramallah. In Ramallah, they were pulled out of their car by Palestinian policemen who took their gun away and brought them to the police station in town and took them to the 2nd floor. Very quickly, the rumor was spread that there are 2 Israeli soldiers arrested in the Palestinian police station. The mob began to arrive. They demanded the policemen to bring down the 2 soldiers. They wanted to lynch them. But the Palestinian policemen refused. Instead, they did the work for the mob. They used any tool they found in the police station. They used sticks, metal poles, knives, and guns, and for half an hour they were stabbing and beating the soldiers to death. But the mob demanded blood. So they took one of the soldiers and threw his body from the second floor into the crowd. We all remember the videos. We all remember the picture of the bloody hands from the window. And then the mob took the body, ripped it to shreds, took out the internal organs of the bodies, and lit it on fire. By the end, when the body was turned into the Israeli forces, there was almost nothing left to say a prayer on. We are young lawyers, right out of law school. I was studying at Bar-Ilan University, my friends were studying in Hebrew University and Tel Aviv University. And we felt that somebody has to pay for this horrible lynching. That in any other country, the police and the state would be responsible for this lynching. So we decided to sue the Palestinian Authority. The problem was that nobody sued the Palestinian Authority before. Nobody ever brought a terror organization into a court of law. But we took the risk and we filed a lawsuit in the District Court of Jerusalem. And shortly after, we decided that perhaps we can continue with these lawsuits and bring them against those who finance the terror organizations, those who sponsor them, those who really send the terrorists to go and kill Israelis and Jews. So we filed more lawsuits in Israel and in the United States against the organizations and their financial patrons. And then, after 2 years, we started winning in court. We got judgments for hundreds of millions of dollars on our behalf. We got liens for tens of millions of dollars. We got unprecedented decisions. So we were approached by the Israeli government by a special unit in the Mossad called Harpoon, which its goal was to track terror financing. It was a secret unit until we wrote a book about it. The book is outside for sale. Which had representatives of all the military forces and the intelligence forces in Israel, and had representatives of the Justice Ministry and the Foreign Ministry and the Treasury, and they all were gathering and brainstorming how to block terror financing. It was headed by the legendary head of the Mossad, Meir Dagan, which realized that if you want to stop the terrorism, you have to stop their funding, because money is the oxygen to anything, including terrorism. If you stop the flow of the money, you can stop the flow of the terrorism. They approached us and asked us if we can utilize the ton of evidence that they were accumulated in the different operations against those who make the money come from Europe and the United States to the hands of the terror organizations in the West Bank and Gaza, the banks. So we couldn't do it as private lawyers anymore. We established Shurat Hadin Israel Law Center, a non-for-profit organization, to support this litigation worldwide. And this is what we've been doing until today. We represent hundreds of terror victims in lawsuits and legal actions against Hamas, Islamic Jihad, PLO, the Palestinian Authority, Iran, Syria, North Korea, Arab banks, European banks, Chinese banks, Lebanese banks, the social media network, Google, Facebook, Twitter, fighting terrorism in courts. And I will tell you about a portion of these cases. Ella Bukassis was 17 years old when she was walking one day with her brother, 15 years old, coming back home in Sderot when the red alert went off. This is the alarm that goes on when the missiles are falling from Gaza. In Tel Aviv, you have 90 seconds to find a shelter. In Ashdod, which is a little bit southern in Tel Aviv, you have 60 seconds to find a shelter. In Sderot, you have 15 seconds to find a shelter. She was walking down the street, it was a bare street. There was no building, no bus to hide underneath them. So the only thing that went into her mind is to protect her brother. She fell over her brother, she covered him. The missile fell right near their heads. Many shrapnels went to both heads. She fought for 7 days of her life in the hospital. She died. Her brother is disabled for life. We are asked by Harpoon if we can file a lawsuit against the major bank that provided financial services to Hamas at the time. We agreed. We filed a lawsuit in the federal court in New York, and we recently won. The father of Ella Bukasis called me up. He said, "Thank you for letting me fight back. Thank you for getting me my integrity back. I feel I'm no longer a victim." And this is what these cases do. No money can bring back life, but money gives a measure of closure, a measure of justice to the terror victims. Our victory in this case was another fault. Because not only this bank immediately shut down the accounts that they had for Hamas, this lawsuit sent a shockwave through the international banking system that no bank agreed anymore to open bank account to a designated organization. No bank agreed to provide financial services to Islamic charities that are identified with terror organizations. And no bank agreed to operate in terror zones like South Lebanon, like Gaza. There is no banking system in Gaza. This is why we saw them smuggling money into Gaza through suitcases, through the tunnels, with money changers. But that caused Hamas a great deal of harm because they need to bring hundreds of millions of dollars into the Gaza Strip. They need a bank. They run a government in order to support the population, in order to use them as human shields, in order to urge them to send their kids to the border with Israel, to infiltrate into Israel, to allow Hamas follow them and then carry out their terror attacks. They have to pay this family money. They have to support their prisoner who are sitting in the Israeli jail. They have to support their militants, their military, and they have to manufacture more and more missiles. This entire infrastructure cost Hamas $500 million. They need a bank to bring this money into the Gaza Strip. And every time they found a bank that allowed them to do so, we went and filed a lawsuit against this bank in the federal courts in New York. I always said that Citibank has a slogan. We're trying to make banking easier. We have a slogan. We're trying to make banking much harder to the terrorists. From the beginning, we started filing lawsuits against state-sponsored terrorism. Every time Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah are carrying out attacks against Israelis, we go and file a lawsuit against Iran, against Syria, or against North Korea in the Federal District Court of Washington. These countries do not defend themselves. They don't send lawyers to court. We prove our case, we prove our damages, and we get a default judgment against them, usually for hundreds of millions of dollars. But we don't stop there. Our goal is to collect the judgments. So in the beginning, we found bank accounts that belong to the Iranian government, frozen in the United States. We wanted to enforce our judgment against the money in the account. The State Department opposed us. The State Department did not want the victims to receive the money. They wanted to keep it for better days with Iran. We hired a lobbyist. We changed the law in the Congress, which overcame the objections of the State Department. The law said that the right of the victims to enforce their judgment against foreign states that are designated as a terrorist state governs any other rights. And we are able to seize the money in the account and give it to the terror victims. We also found a house that belonged to the Persian Shah. Years ago, when the son of the Persian Shah wanted to become a pilot, his father sent him to Lubbock, Texas, where they have a big Air Force base, and bought him a house. After the Islamic Revolution, the house became a property of the Islamic government. We learned about the house. We went to the sheriff in Lubbock, Texas, gave him our judgment, and asked him to force a sale on the house. The sheriff sold the house, gave the money to the terror victims. Recently, when Boeing signed an agreement, came to a deal with Iran to sell them 80 aircrafts for $17 billion, we went and put a lien on this deal. We went to the court in Chicago, where Boeing has its headquarters, filed a lien, said we have a judgment against Iran. We are entitled to the Iranian money that will go in this deal or to the aircrafts. Boeing came to court, they said we can't really do that because if we put a lien on the deal, Iran will cancel the deal, which will affect the nuclear agreement, because one of the components of the nuclear agreement was that Iran will be allowed to purchase American manufactured airplanes. So the court didn't know what to do. They approached the State Department for a position, and after 8 months, the State Department came to court, filed a statement of interest, said that the right of the victims to enforce their judgment against those who devastated their life governs any other right, and they are not going to get involved with the case. They allowed it to go forward against Boeing. And just recently we filed a lien on an Iranian tanker that was caught in Gibraltar, which had 2 million tons of oil on it. We came and said the victims are entitled to this oil. We filed a lien on Lufthansa that flies to Iran. Every time Lufthansa's airplanes land in Iran, they have to pay taxes to the Iranian government. Once again, this share belongs to the terror victims. As a result of our cases, so far we received $2 billion in judgments. We were able to put a lien on $500 million in terror assets, and we were able to collect more than $300 million that went to the hands of the terror victims. This is what I call justice. Jonathan Bauer was 7 years old when he was walking one day with his father in Jaffa Street in Jerusalem. They were heading home, coming back from a doctor appointment, and just in front of them there was a big, wide-shouldered man walking towards them. What they didn't know back then is that the man was a Palestinian policeman. They also didn't know he was wearing an explosive vest. And in his vest he had bolts and nuts and screws, as many as he could carry. And then the man looked at Jonathan's eyes and blew himself up. Jonathan fell on the floor, he lost his consciousness. It was Rosh Hashanah Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem, and for 4 days the doctors had many operations on him, trying to take out all the bolts and nuts and screws that went into his arm and his leg. After 4 days, the doctors woke him up. They told the parents that there is one left bolt remaining in his brain that they were too afraid to take out. Today, Jonathan talks. He doesn't talk like we do. He walks. He doesn't walk like we do. He's disabled for life. This wasn't the only attack perpetrated by Palestinian employees. In the beginning of the Intifada, tens of thousands of attacks were done, were assisted, were perpetrated by Palestinian employees, people that received their orders from the Palestinian Authority, people that followed Yasser Arafat's directives. Palestinian policemen, Palestinian security guards, officials of the PLO, policemen for 417. We wanted to receive a judgment from a federal court in the United States declaring who's responsible for the Intifada. that it's not a grassroots operation as a Palestinian claim, but it's something planned, something that its goal is to devastate the state of Israel. So he went and filed a lawsuit against the Palestinian Authority on behalf of 10 families of American citizens that lost their loved ones in the attacks during the Intifada, and filed it in 2004 in New York. The Palestinian Authority hired a lawyer, filed a motion to dismiss. They say that they are a state, or at least they have a status of a state, and therefore they enjoy sovereign immunity. They cannot be sued in court. They said the United States has no jurisdiction over the Palestinian Authority. And they said what the Palestinian employees did consider to be a legitimate act of war, and therefore it's unjusticiable. No court can deal with this case. It took the court 4 years to throw out their motion to dismiss. The court ruled the Palestinian Authority is not a state, they don't have sovereign immunity, there is personal jurisdiction over them in the United States, and you can say a lot about what the Palestinian employees did, but you could not say it was a legitimate act of war. Case went to discovery and deposition for 7 years, and eventually went to trial. It was a jury trial in New York. It opened in January 2015. I had to spend the coldest months of my life in New York. The Palestinian Authority had a defense. They said, indeed, they were our employees, but they were rogue employees. They did the attacks after work hours. They weren't authorized to kill Israelis. It wasn't our policy to kill Jews. But when the trial opened, they found it hard to explain to the jury. If they were rogue employees, how do you keep paying their salaries until today? These terrorists that were caught by the Israeli forces, who put on trial in the Israeli court and now serve their sentence in the Israeli jail, keeps receiving salary from you. You pay them money on a monthly basis. You promote them in rank every 3 years. You pay compensations to their families. You pay stipends to the families of the suicide bombers. You call town squares and soccer games on the names of the suicide bombers. This is not how you treat rogue employees. This is not when your policy is against killing Jews. The trial lasted 50 days, day after day. The jury sat there and listened to all the evidence that were presented in the case. And they listened to the experts, and they reviewed the documents, and they listened to the victims, and they went out for liberation. And when they came back from the liberation, after 2 days, and we were so afraid, they handed out their judgment. And in their judgment, they found the Palestinian Authority responsible for all 24 acts of terrorism and gave us a judgment against them for $655 million. The Palestinian Authority was in shock. They fired their law firm from DC, hired a new one from New York, and filed an appeal. In the United States, in order to file an appeal, you have to post a bond for the entire amount of the judgment. The Palestinian Authority claimed that they don't have $650 million to post as a bond. So they reached out to the State Department for help, and the State Department helped. It was under Obama's administration. The State Department came to court, filed a statement of interest saying that although they recognize the rights of the victims to enforce their judgments, the Palestinian Authority is a national security asset of the United States in the Middle East. They wanted to keep existing to the side of the Israeli state, and they don't want it to go bankrupt. They asked the court to be considerate, and the court was. Instead of $655 million, the court ordered $10 million bond. And now the way was open for the Palestinian Authority to argue their appeal. They didn't argue against the jury's verdict. They didn't argue against the tone of evidence we put in the case, the expert reports, the expert testimony, the victim's testimony, the tens of thousands of documents we filed in this case. They argued one technical argument: personal jurisdiction. They said the Palestinian Authority does not function in the United States. They don't live in the United States, they don't work in the United States, they don't represent themselves in the United States, they don't represent the United States. There is no personal jurisdiction. And the court had a dilemma. Because on one hand, we find this case based on the Anti-Terrorism Act. This is a law that allows American citizens that got killed or injured abroad in a terror attack to bring their cases in the United States against overseas terror organizations. It's an extraterritorial jurisdiction law. On the other hand, there is the American Constitution, which demands due process. But having in front of them the State Department statement of interest, saying, in other words, that whatever you inflict on the Palestinian Authority, they don't have money to pay, the courts of appeals vacate the judgments. We're in the Supreme Court, filed a motion for a writ, and the Supreme Court, knowing that there is a new Pharaoh, they didn't know Joseph, approached the new State Department for a position. Now it was under Trump's administration. But the State Department came to court and upheld the decision of the Courts of Appeal, saying this law is unconstitutional, and we lost the writ. But we didn't stop there. We went to Congress. We told them there is a problem. We litigated this case for 15 years based on a law that you legislated. It was a very well-intended law, but now the Supreme Court found it unconstitutional. So you have to fix the problem. And the way for you to fix the problem is to reinstate personal jurisdiction, is to come and legislate a law that says that if the Palestinian Authority wants to continue receiving financial aid from the American government, they have to consent to personal jurisdiction when it comes to terror victim litigation. Congress agreed. They passed this law. President Trump signed off the law. And now we are in the process of reinstating personal jurisdiction. The Palestinian Authority has to make a decision whether they want the U.S. aid or they agree to litigate these cases. We'll wait and see what they do. But I can tell you one thing, which I was told by the security services in Israel, that the Palestinian Authority could not believe how the little support they gave the terrorists before the attack, how the little money they paid them, the weapons they provided them with, the safe haven they gave them after the attack, turned in the end of the day to hundreds of millions of dollars in damages against them. And our case against the social media. If you were walking in Jerusalem in October 2015, you would not dare to walk down the street without looking back that somebody follows you with a knife. Hundreds of terror attacks happened in the recent years in Israel called stabbing attacks by lone wolves. More than 50 people got killed, more than 100 got injured. If you look at the terrorists, if you look at those who grab a knife and go and kill, you'll see that they are very young people, 15 years old, 16 years old, teenagers. And you wonder what brings these teenagers to go and kill Jews? What drives them to go to their mother's kitchen, grab a knife, and go and kill a Jew? knowing that in the end of the day they might get killed or stay the rest of their life in jail. And you realize that this is the incitement to kill that drive them to do that. But the incitement that in previous intifadas used to take place in the town squares and the mosques, today is taking place in the social media. Hundreds of posts calling to kill Israelis, pages named Stab the Jews, and videos illustrating how to stab, teaching you where to push the knife, how to twist the knife, what poison to put on the knife before you go and stab, where to ambush the Jew, diagrams of human's body, where to slaughter the Jew. And all these terrorists had a Facebook page where they themselves post, I'm going to become a shaheed. It's time to start a third intifada. It's time to liberate Al-Aqsa Mosque. And after they go on step, you will find tens of thousands of posts endorsing their acts and glorifying it. All of this incitement is going on Facebook, because Facebook is the most popular social media networks among the Palestinians, to the extent that our Prime Minister Netanyahu called this wave of terrorism the Facebook Intifada. And then he urged his ministers to go and meet with officials of Facebook to turn this incitement down. But Facebook refused. Facebook said that they are only a neutral bulletin board. They are not involved with their content, they are not involved with their users, they are not taking a side in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we decided to take Facebook to court. And to do that, we gathered 20,000 Israelis that joined the lawsuit. We filed an injunction against Facebook in New York, which was twofold. One, that Facebook will take down this incitement. But the other is that Facebook will be proactive, monitor this incitement, and take it down. We said that Facebook has the tools, they have the algorithm to do that. The same way Facebook knows what type of coffee I drink in the morning, they can detect these deadly words and take them down. Facebook filed a motion to dismiss. They said they are immune according to the Communication Decency Act. This is a law from 1996 that Congress legislated in order to keep the internet open. It grants blanket immunity to social media networks from content that users are posting on their platforms. We filed our response and said that when Congress legislated this law, they did not envision this type of words that cause people to go and kill, and they should not be protected. We also claim that Facebook is not a neutral bulletin board. They're very involved with their users. They make billions of dollars from content. And we said that Facebook does take a position in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, depends to which side. And to prove this, we opened 2 pages on Facebook, 2 identical pages. One page calls to kill Palestinians, the other page calls to kill Israelis. And we posted identical posts with identical images, just with one difference. One against Palestinians, the other against Israelis. And after 2 days, we asked Facebook to take down both pages. Facebook immediately took down the page that called to kill Palestinians. They sent us a firm message saying they checked the page and it does not fit their community standards. But they left the Israeli page standing. They sent us a message saying that they checked the page and it does not violate their community standards. But we know we have a problem. The Communication Decency Act is an absolute law. There are no exceptions whatsoever. Anybody can put anything they want on the social media networks and they will be immune. So we're looking to see if there is something that Facebook could not be immune from. And I believe we found it. It's aiding and abetting terrorism. In the United States, no American company is allowed to provide any sort of material support, any sort of services to a designated organization. Facebook is not allowed to provide a platform to provide social media services to Hamas, which is a designated organization. Hamas cannot use Facebook to spread their propaganda, to send their messages, to recruit and incite people to go and kill, to raise funds. It's all prohibited according to the Anti-Terrorism Act, and it imposed criminal and civil liability on those who violate this law. That means monetary damages. So he went and gathered 5 families that lost their loved ones in the recent stabbing attacks in Israel, and filed a lawsuit against Facebook in New York for $1 billion. One of the families representing the families of Taylor Force. We all know him from Taylor Force Act. Taylor Force was a 29-year-old student, a West Point graduate. After his military service in Afghanistan and Iraq, went to business school, and then he took a trip to Israel. On his second day, he was walking on Jaffa port and got stabbed to death by Palestinian terrorists. One of the victims is Richard Lakin. Richard Lakin was a human rights activist, one who believed in coexistence. He took a bus in Jerusalem, and then 2 terrorists from the Hamas boarded the bus, shut down the door behind them, and started shooting towards all the passengers. They did not kill Richard, they injured him, but they ran out of ammunition, so they took a knife and finished the job. One of the victims is Hillel Yafario. Hillel was a beautiful girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, an excellent student, a great ballet dancer. She was 13 years old. And one day she had a performance in her community, Kiryat Arba. She went with her parents, she danced. In the end of the evening, they had a competition. She won. And in the end of the night, they went back home to sleep. She didn't have school the next day, so she stayed in bed when her parents left to work. And then a terrorist from the nearby village entered the community. He did not do it through the front gate. He made a cut in the fence that alerted security services. They came riding on their jeep looking for the one that infiltrated the community. They did not find him. He was hiding behind a bush. When they drove away, he got up. He went to the first house he saw. He tried to open the door. The door was locked, so he went through the window. He wound up in Hillel's room. He was holding a knife, and he stabbed her 17 times in her bed until she died. He was 15 years old. He had a Facebook page where before he went to stab, he wrote, "Death is a right, and I deserve this right." We cannot let Facebook sit in their ivory towers in Palo Alto when the blood is spilled on the street of Jerusalem. We have to find them accountable. We have to teach them that as a social media network, they have social responsibility, and they have to take this incitement down, because words can really kill. And it's not only Facebook. Imagine ISIS without YouTube. Imagine ISIS without these beheading videos. Who would even know about ISIS? Who would even care? How people in Austria and Switzerland know to go and take a plane to Turkey, and from Turkey cross the border to Iraq and Syria and join ISIS over there? CNN does not screen these videos. New York Times does not put an ad recruiting people to join ISIS. It's only on the social media, and it has to stop. So in order not to make it a Jewish problem or Israeli problem, we represent ISIS victims from the Paris attack, from the Brussels attack, in a lawsuit against Facebook, against Twitter, against YouTube, in the courts in the United States. These are unprecedented cases. It's very, very hard, and it's going all the way to the Supreme Court, because in the end, the court has to decide what governs. The Anti-Terrorism Act that prohibits aiding and abetting terrorism, or the Communication Decency Act that gives the social media networks immunity. I believe that we're right, and in the end we will win. But until then, I also believe that we'll make the social media networks change their policy to the extent that they will no longer allow incitement on their platforms, because they will reach a decision and a conclusion that there should be zero tolerance to terrorism on the internet. And just the last one story. Because when Israel's enemies realize that they cannot win us militarily, and despite the wars they launch against us and the horrific wave of terrorism they launched against us, we are still here. They started using a different type of weapon, non-conventional one, but a very devastating one. It's called BDS. And they call companies and corporations and universities from all over the world to boycott Israel, to sanction it, to divest from it, in order to promote what they see as a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a one-state solution, a Palestinian state. Their narrative is to call to all the refugees from 1948, from the Independence War, to come back and settle in Israel. Back then, there were 600,000 of them. Today, there are 5 million. And they call them up to use the right of return and settle in Israel under the slogan, "Let demography win." Our organization, Shredder, is involved in fighting this BDS. Our recent victory was the Airbnb case. When Airbnb decided that they are going to delist Jewish homes from Judea and Samaria because they no longer want to have houses in occupied territories on their platform, we realized that this is an act of discrimination, because they didn't delist the houses of the Palestinians or the Muslims or the Christians, only the houses of the Jews. And they did not delist themselves from other occupied territories in the world, like Northern Cyprus, like Western Sahara. So we went and filed a lawsuit against Airbnb in the Delaware court, where they are incorporated, under the Fair Housing Law. We came and said Airbnb discriminates against Jews based on their religion, and this is prohibited. And Airbnb came after 3 months and asked us to settle the case out of court. This is only a portion of the cases we're litigating in Israel, United States, Europe, and Canada. Every day we get more and more calls from more and more terror victims that want to fight back. They are seeking justice, that more than anything else in the world don't want to be victims anymore, and we are dedicated to help them. Shurat Adin is a non-for-profit organization, take these all hundreds of cases and fight them in an orderly manner in the courts around the world. I urge you all to learn about us, to join our Facebook page, and become part of our community. We need your support. We have to fight terrorism in court because we do what the Israeli government cannot do. The Israeli government cannot file lawsuits against other governments or against banks or against their organizations. The Israeli government cannot represent themselves in the International Criminal Court, where we as NGO can. The Israeli government have political considerations, they have restraints, they have to be politically correct. We don't. We are a private non-profit that represents private people that have one goal: to bankrupt terrorism, one lawsuit at a time. And we will keep fighting terrorism because we don't have any other choice. We live in Israel. We want to send our kids to school and make sure they're coming back safe. We want to ride our buses, to shop in our malls, to sit in our cafes. We want to walk the street of Jerusalem without looking back when somebody follows us with a knife. We want to live safely in our country, and this is our country. And yes, it's a war. And yes, it will be an uphill battle. But in the end, I can assure you, as a matter of fact, you all know that in the end, we are going to win. Because we are fighting for our national survival. The Torah told us, "Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa," don't stand idly by your brother's blood. We cannot stand idly by our brother's blood. We cannot afford it. The state of Israel cannot afford it. You cannot afford it. Thank you very much.
Do any of you have questions? We'll pass the mic around.
Two mics. Where the mics?
What about this?
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Has Sharat Hadin attempted to seize assets from the Swiss bank accounts of individuals within the Palestinian Authority?
This question based on the assumption that there are bank accounts in Switzerland that belong to Palestinian Authority's leaders.
Alleged bank accounts.
I'm not sure we know of any bank accounts in Switzerland per se that belong to people in the Palestinian Authority. I can tell you though that now we began filing lawsuits against money changers that help Hamas to get their funding because, as I said before, due to lack of banking system in Gaza, Hamas cannot receive the money through wire transactions, so they just get assisted by money changers. And those money changers have bank accounts. I don't know if they have in Switzerland, but they do have bank accounts in the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, not in Gaza. And they also have bank accounts in the United States. So our lawsuits against them will be enforced eventually against these bank accounts. There was a rumor that Yasser Arafat had billions of dollars in France or in Switzerland. This rumor was never proven, so we could not even go after his assets. But when we know for sure about bank accounts, trust me that we will go after them.
I can talk loud.
Okay.
Have you taken any cases to courts in Europe, out in the market, and what happened?
So, Europe is a tough venue to file lawsuits. First of all, without getting to the courts in Europe or to the political environment of Europe, whether they like Jews or don't like Jews, just to file a lawsuit in Europe, you need a lot of money. First, you have to pay filing fees. And the filing fees is a percentage of the amount of the lawsuit. In the United States, you don't have to. In Israel, you don't have to. But in Europe, you do have. So if your lawsuit is for millions of dollars, the fee will be accordingly. You also have to post a bond to cover the other side's expenses in case you lose the case. That comes to perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you have to pay attorney's fees. Usually we work with lawyers who work on contingency basis or pro bono. In the United States, in Europe, in Canada, in Israel, a lot of the lawyers just take the case on pro bono basis or on contingency. If they win, they get a portion of the case. If not, they just volunteered 15 years of their life to their endeavor. In Europe, there doesn't exist. The word pro bono does not translate in Italy or Germany or France. Just know that. And we are a non-for-profit, so we cannot afford paying attorney's fees, and therefore we usually don't have cases in Europe. I can tell you that recently we did 2 cases. One is against the Iranian tanker in Gibraltar, and it was quite tiring to deal with the British lawyer. And one case was in Italy, and he didn't charge us a lot. It was really minimum, but it was an interesting case. We found out that there is a bank account in Rome that had $500 million that belonged to the National Oil Company of Iran. So we took our American judgment against Iran and wanted to enforce them against the money in the account. We hired an Italian lawyer. He didn't charge us a lot of money, and filed a motion for enforcing the judgment, along with a motion for a lien. We wanted to seize the money, not to let Iran pull out the money. And the court gave us a preemptive lien. Seized the money and called the parties to a hearing in front of him. Iran that never comes to court. Not only send lawyers to court, they got the Vatican involved, they send lawyers to court. They got the government of Italy involved, they send representatives to court. All the banks that had relationship with Iran send representatives to court. The National Oil Company has lawyers to court. They were standing there, 20 lawyers, and screaming at the judge in Italian. And they had 2 arguments. First, you cannot enforce your judgment against the Iranian government, against the National Oil Company. They're not the same entities, they don't share the same assets. The other argument was that they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. 20 lawyers were standing there in court, and yet they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. We hired an international law expert that testified in regimes like Iran, there is no difference between the government to the National Oil Company, and they do share the same assets. You can enforce your judgment. We also claimed that the service that we did to Iran was sufficient, but the court, who wanted to go on the safe side, asked us to reserve Iran. And in the meantime, he took off the lien. 1 hour after he took off the lien, Iran shipped the money away from Rome to Thailand. We went back to Israel, pretty disappointed, but we were called by the guys from Harpoon, who wanted us to tell them about our success in Italy. And I told them, what success? We lost the case. He said, yes, but as a result of this proceeding, Iran never went back and put its money in the Italian banks. Can you do the same thing in France and Germany? And we did. And Iran pulled its money from the French and the German banks to the extent that they could not use the euro anymore. It was the time of the Intifada and the sanctions from the United States. They could not use the dollar, they could not use the euro, and therefore they could not fund the terror organizations in the West Bank and Gaza that utilize these 3 currencies.
Wow.
Because the groups that you go after know now that you, well, even from the beginning, that you're not going to back down. Have you ever, or anybody in on your team, been threatened so that you would back down?
We get no phone calls in Arabic, and I assume there are characters, although I don't understand the language so well. And we get like, threats through emails and stuff like this. And we do take steps to protect ourselves. Mostly in Europe, when we go and speak in Europe, we make sure that there are guards in the door, we don't publish it, the events we're speaking. We being pretty cautious, but we will not stop. We'll just continue on. Nothing will deter us.
You are using the laws against the terrorists. The Muslims have for years been engaged in lawfare. They just accuse you, you have to defend yourself, and they bankrupt you. That's their way of doing it in the West. Can you say anything of the actions that the Muslims in the West are taking to harm us? They openly say we'll use your laws to destroy you, and they are doing it.
You're talking about
care and organizations like that.
like CARE. CARE is not suing us. CARE supports Hamas, and they were put on trial for that, but they don't take legal actions against Jews in particular. There are people who bring lawsuits, usually frivolous lawsuits, against Israelis and against Jews. And we are involved with some of them. Like, for instance, there is a major lawsuit going on right now against Sheldon Adelson, against Benjamin Netanyahu, against Kushner, against a lot of donors to organizations in the West Bank, a lot of accountants, a lot of lawyers that are involved with the West Bank, based on the allegations of that these people commit war crimes. Why they commit war crimes? Because they help organizations which are based in the West Bank, and everybody who's active in the West Bank commit war crimes. The territory is occupied, you cannot be engaged with these acts. And this stuff is going on, it's really going on. We're able to get ourselves out of our clients out of the lawsuit. We represented Nordstrom that had Dead Sea products, and the plaintiffs claim that the Dead Sea products is using land from the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea is an occupied territory, so we are committing war crimes. We're able to get out of this lawsuit, but everybody understands it is a frivolous lawsuit. Everybody understands that eventually it will be dismissed, but they keep us, they keep the other defendants on board. And yes, this is their way to engage with lawfare against Israelis. Or, for instance, they file lawsuits for war crime allegations against Ehud Barak, who was the chief of staff, against Avi Dichter, who was the head of the Shabak. All lawsuits going on in the United States. Eventually, they get dismissed because these people enjoy sovereign immunity. They are officials of the Israeli government, but they take these actions. They don't care. They know that if you file a lawsuit, you occupy the mind of the defendant, you bother him, you ruin his life, and they are very happy to do so. Our cases are not frivolous. When we file a lawsuit, it has merits, it's very, very well thought, and most of the time, we win.
It sounds like you must have a lot of attorneys
here, there, and everywhere. Can you give us a feel on how many attorneys might be working on particular cases at any one time?
Oh, so our offices are in Tel Aviv. We have 6 lawyers working in the office, they are on staff. But we have a lot of lawyers working with us as co-counsels around the world. We have law firms that are engaged with our cases in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, South Africa. These lawyers, as I said, work on contingency basis or pro bono basis. And how many lawyers it takes to carry out a case? It depends. When we file a lawsuit, it's usually one law firm. It's a very simple process. You write a complaint, you file it in court, you have to deal with a motion to dismiss. Sometimes you engage experts, sometimes you have to draft some affidavits, but this is the scope of the case when it's just getting filed. Once you pass motion to dismiss, then it turns to be complicated. You have to go through discovery, you have to go through depositions. Sometimes there are tens of thousands of documents, sometimes there are tens of experts, and you have to get a big law firm on your side. So in cases that we went into these preliminary proceedings, we engaged with big law firms. Arnold Porter in New York, Chad Warren in Washington, and I can tell you that I already foresee that we'll have problems to get big law firm in our social media cases. Because when you reach out to a big law firm and ask them to sue Facebook, they will say, let me think. You want me to lose potential huge representations of Facebook just to sue them on behalf of Jews? I don't think so. So that would be a hard case to find a law firm, but again, once we pass the motion to dismiss, we'll have to find lawyers. Right now, all our cases are litigated by competent lawyers that were able to take the cases on a very successful manner.
I'm interested in your slogan, Bankrupting Terrorism, one lawsuit at a time. It's hard for me to imagine that you're actually going to bankrupt the government of Iran or Facebook. Are there any parties or people or organizations whom you actually have bankrupted?
There is one bank. Its name was Lebanese Canadian Bank. And I say it was because it went bankrupt. That was a bank that, it's based in Jordan, it's based in Lebanon, and that was the base of Hezbollah. They carried out all the financial infrastructure of Hezbollah, started with loans and investments and bank accounts for their officials and their leaders. And the name was Lebanese Canadian Bank because they tried to open a branch in Canada, but they were refused because they are engaged with Hezbollah. But they kept their name. And then during the second Lebanese war in Israel in 2006, Israel had an idea. It actually was the idea of Harpoon and Meir Dagan that say that Hezbollah is keeping its money in the Lebanese bank in cash because they don't trust the banks. They keep them safe in banks, and Meir Dagan asked permission from Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to go and bomb the banks from the air. He said, listen, if you want to stop the war, If you want to bring Hezbollah on their knees to negotiate a ceasefire with you, you have to cut their funding. You have to destroy them financially. And the way for you to do it is to simply burn all their money. So why don't you send airplanes and they will just engage with airstrikes against these banks. So Ehud Olmert agreed, but the Air Force said that it's insane. You don't go and bomb banks during a war. Ehud Olmert insisted, and the Air Force striked the banks, and in this way, billions of dollars of Hezbollah money just got destroyed. And after 3 days, Hezbollah negotiated a ceasefire with Israel. So some of the money of Hezbollah disappeared, and then, but the Lebanese bank continued on. And then Meir Dagan and his team approached the United States government to block any transaction that the bank is doing in the United States. Because every bank that wants to do a dollar transaction has to go through a correspondent American bank. And they asked the American authorities not to allow any transactions going to the United States banks. The United States did not like this idea. They thought that if they block any transactions, they might collapse the Lebanese economy, because the Lebanese Canadian Bank was a major bank in Lebanon. And it took a couple of years for United States to agree to do so. And they did it as a result of our lawsuit. We went and filed a lawsuit against Lebanese Canadian Bank and against the American Correspondent Bank, which was American Express Bank. We filed a lawsuit on behalf of victims of the Second Lebanese War, American citizens that got killed during the war or injured. And this brought the United States to open an investigation to see whether allegations are correct. And this investigation brought to 5 indictments against Lebanese Canadian Bank to the extent that they simply shut down the bank. Wow. So today there is no Lebanese Canadian Bank anymore.
This Meir Dagan you mentioned, what exactly is his position?
He was the former head of the Mossad. He was heading this unit, Harpoon.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, there will be refreshments in the lobby.